So, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are going to have the theme of this service, although you might argue the theme of many of our services, this evening is Music Shabbat. And it's also, we're going to kind of lean into our more youthful side. So even though we're calling it Music and Youth Shabbat, if you are not an age that allows you to get the kid menu anymore, that does not mean that you are not allowed to be a part of this service. Each of us has a youthful side. We each have our inner child. And so I hope that we each can find something that's meaningful as we get our Shabbat started. We are going to start on page 128 with the words of Hine Matov. Hine matov umanayim sheverachim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim sheverachim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim sheverachim gam yachad. Matov umanayim sheverachim gam yachad. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Hine matov umanayim sheverachim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim sheverachim gam yachad. Sheverachim gam yachad. We continue welcoming Shabbat with the lighting of Shabbat candles. It's my pleasure to invite Janine Charlton and Ann Anderson to share with us a reading and then a blessing. The reading can be found on page 127, and the blessing is on 120. And Hannah too.
We offer thanks, O God, for this Shabbat, which unites us in faith and hope, for Shabbat holiness, which inspires sacred living, for Shabbat memories, glowing even in darkness, for Shabbat peace, born of friendship and love. We offer thanks and blessings, O God.
Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tivanu l'chalik ner shel Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. We continue on page 130 for the words of Lechu Naranana. Let's come, let us sing joyously. Lechu Naranana l'Adonai, Naria l'Tzoyishenu. Lechu Naranana l'Adonai, Naria l'Tzoyishenu. Lekadma fanav betoda, v'zmirot naria lo. Lechu Naranana l'Adonai, Naria l'Tzoyishenu. Lechu Naranana l'Adonai, Naria l'Tzoyishenu. Mekadma fanav betoda, v'zmirot naria lo. Kadma fanav betoda, v'zmirot naria lo. Nekadma fanav betoda, v'zmirot naria lo. We continue with welcoming the Shabbat with Lecha Dodi on page 138. Lecha Dodi, Lichat Kala, B'nei Shabbat, Nekavela. Lecha Dodi, Lichat Kala, B'nei Shabbat mekavela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Yishmi'anu el hamiuchad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad, L'shemo tiferet v'litehila. Lecha Dodi, Likat Kala, B'nei Shabbat mekavela. Lecha Dodi, Likat Kala, B'nei Shabbat mekavela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'necha, Ki mekor ha'beracha. Merosh mikedem nesucha, Sof ma'aseh v'machshava tchila. Lecha Dodi, Likat Kala, B'nei Shabbat mekavela. Lecha Dodi, Likat Kala, B'nei Shabbat mekavela. Please rise in the ways you're able. Boi v'shalom ateret bala, Gam besimcha uv'sohala, Toch emunei am segula. Boi chala, Lecha Dodi, Likat Kala, B'nei Shabbat mekavela. Lecha Dodi, Likat Kala, B'nei Shabbat mekavela. We are on page 146 for the words of Baruch Hu, and we ask ourselves, am I awake? Not necessarily am I not sleeping, but am I present? Am I in this moment? Am I prepared? And we ask God, are you listening to my prayer? Ya la 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 la, 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 ya la 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 la. Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Baruch hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed, le'olam va'ed. Ya la 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 la, 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 ya la 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 la. Please be seated. We're on the next page. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Boreom v'layla, golel ur mipnei choshech, golel ur mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on the evening. Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. We turn to page 152 for the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. On page 158, we have the words of Mi Chamocha, which we read in the Torah just a couple weeks ago. And in that Torah portion, it's amazing. We have this extreme moment of joy. We're so excited. We're finally free. Woohoo! It's awesome. And then almost immediately, the Jews start worrying. They're like, well, at least in Egypt we had food, but I'm hungry. And it turns out that you don't just find food hanging around in the desert so much. So the Israelites were a little bit frightened for good reason. That being said, they also likely had a propensity for that anxiety, right? The things that just happened were a little too good. Things went a little too smoothly on our end. When's the other shoe going to drop? There's a term for this. It's called foreboding joy. It's when something really joyous or happy happens to us, and even just for a moment, our brain turns to, oh God, it can't stay this happy forever. What's going to go wrong? And perhaps that feels familiar to you. And it's familiar to the Jewish people's story. But as we sing Mi Chamocha this evening, I hope that we'll be able to enjoy Mi Chamocha for its own sake and allow ourselves to perhaps turn away from that foreboding joy. Let's not just jump to what's going to go wrong next. There may be something that goes wrong. Historically, that also happens sometimes. But we should be able to feel joy for the sake of joy. We should be able to feel happy for the sake of happy. And when challenging things come, then we'll take it at that moment. So we are on page 158 for the words of Mi Chamocha. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef eleh, nora tehilot osef eleh. Malechutecha ra'u v'necha, bokei ayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, ze'elianu ve'amru, ze'elianu ve'ameru, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. ya la la la, ya la 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 la. Ya la la la, ya la 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 la. We are on the next page, and we ask that God spread a Sukkot Shalom over all of us, a shelter of peace. Over not just us in a physical sense, but also so that we can feel that moment of calm, feel that moment of joy or fun without having to look over at what could possibly go wrong, just to have a moment to dwell in peace. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Ve'al Yerushalayim ve'al kol amo. Ve'al Yerushalayim shalom. Ve'al Yerushalayim ve'al kol amo. Ve'al Yerushalayim shalom. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Blessed are you, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Jerusalem. We turn to page 164 for the beginning of the core part of our service, our tefillah. Please rise in the ways you are able. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Ve'konei Hakol, Ve'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממיץ ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Please take a moment for your own silent prayer, and when your personal prayer is complete, feel free to be seated. יהיו לרצון אמרי פי והגיון ליבי לפניך, אדוני צורי, אדוני צורי וגואלי יהיו לרצון אמרי פי והגיון ליבי לפניך, אדוני צורי, אדוני This Shabbat, we are going to hear a story about a baker who gets reminded of his roots in an unlikely place, or at least unlikely for him. The story is called What the Baker Forgot. Nate leaned over the 6-tier wedding cake he was decorating. His face was scrunched up in concentration. Flour, swag, flour, ... with his hand smoothly squeezing the icing bag this way and that. Yes, he thought, nodding to the awestruck crowd that stood watching outside his shop window. This is my best work yet. I'm probably going to become famous because of it. Then a gasp of horror broke into his thoughts. The people outside had noticed, although he had not, that his sleeve accidentally brushed the icing that he had just made from those beautiful flowers. Such a masterpiece ruined, murmured the crowd. But then Nate merely shrugged and turned the smudge into a bouquet of beautiful, perfect sugar roses. And the crowd broke into relief and laughter. Oh my gosh, thank God! I didn't know what was going to happen. If you've ever watched The Great British Bake Off, it was one of those moments. Phew, it made it out. It wasn't underproved. Everything turned out okay. And Nate bowed in every direction. Thank you, thank you. I am, in fact, going to become famous. You'll be able to say that you watched outside my window when I just saved this cake. And he then, of course, became completely unaware that a giant dollop of pink frosting graced the edge of his nose as he was bending and bending. And so one might think that the crowd was going to laugh at him. He had some frosting on his nose. But the crowd did not laugh. Nate was an artiste of frosting, a professor of custard, a genius of yeast. A man like that could not be expected to care about whether there was flour in his hair or frosting on his nose. And one night, he came home very late, as usual, and collapsed on the bed next to his wife. Nate, Elisa said sleepily, will you be home for dinner on Friday night? Can't, my little cupcake, he answered. Too much to do. First there's the carrot cakes, and then the apple tarts, and then the... And the next morning, before the sun came up, Nate was already hard at work, sprinkling the cinnamon over some sticky buns, and there was a sharp tap-tap at the shop's door, which startled Nate so much that he dropped the canister of cinnamon, sending a cloud of fragrant spice into the air and all over his face. A girl stood... There we go. A girl stood outside the door. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to bother you, she said as Nate opened the door, sneezing and coughing. I was just wondering if you had any challah for sale. No challah, Nate replied, brushing cinnamon off his eyebrows. Sorry. But after he closed the door behind her, the word challah settled into his mind like powdered sugar on a donut. He could almost taste the delicious challah that he used to bake with his mother. And the crust was golden and firm but not hard, and the inside was so eggy, and it seemed more like a cake than a bread, and so soft and warm. And suddenly, Nate was filled with such longing that he decided to make a few loaves right away. And the yeast was bubbly, and the flour was smooth as silk, and the loaves artistically braided. But when they came out of the oven, Nate could see that they looked different from the challah of his memory. And when the loaves cooked, he could taste that they weren't the same either. This challah wasn't bad, exactly. It just didn't match the bread that he remembered from so long ago, and the bread that his mother kept hidden under the gold-embroidered challah cover on the Shabbat table. It seemed to take forever for her to light the Shabbat candles, and the kiddush his father sang went on and on and on. And then when it was time to pull away the cover, revealing that proud braided challah loaves, or those proud challah loaves, waiting patiently for their blessing, it was the bell. They were the belle of the ball. Nate said the motzi to himself, and then finally he could bite into a sweet, chewy morsel. Such perfect deliciousness was worth waiting for. Nate realized that he'd been standing in the middle of his bakery for a long time, drooling. How embarrassing, he thought, wiping his mouth. And to make it worse, I can't even remember the simple recipe for my mother's challah. It would have been so good for business. As he tumbled into bed late that night, he meant to tell Eliza that he had been trying to make his mother's challah, but he was so tired that he could barely open his mouth to talk. "Elisa," he mumbled as his eyes were already shut. "Sweetie pie, challah." "What's that, my dear?" his wife answered. "Challah? I think there still should be some left over." But Nate was already sleeping. He was already sleeping. He was fast asleep, and he was already dreaming of that challah. For the next few days, he could think of nothing but challah. Every morning he woke up and kneaded his pillow in anticipation, and at breakfast he sprinkled poppy seeds in his cereal, and all day long he baked nothing but challah. Big challah, small challah, round challah, braided challah, poppy seed challah, sesame seed challah, challah with raisin, challah with chocolate, challah every which way. And by Friday, every table, every shelf was filled from floor to ceiling with challah. And in the middle of the bakery, Nate sat, absent-mindedly braiding his own beard, lost in thought. I hope he washed his hands in between touching that and his loaves, wondering why none of the challah seemed quite right. He was so deep in concentration that the sharp tap-tap at the door made him jump off his stool in panic, upsetting a dozen eggs in the process. It was the little girl from the neighborhood again. Her face brightened when she saw the huge collection of challahs, and Nate stepped aside, wiping up the mess while she still made her choice. She inspected the loaves one by one, squeezing and sniffing and poking. This was pre-COVID when you could do that. And instead of picking one, she turned to Nate and asked sadly, "Have you run out of your mother's challah already?" "Did you say my mother's challah?" Nate asked, grimacing as he pulled eggshells out of his shoelaces. "How did you even know about that?" "Well, my family had Shabbat dinner with yours just a few weeks ago," the girl said, "and the challah was so delicious. Your wife said that she made it from your mother's recipe. So, of course, I thought I could buy some in your bakery." She looked around, shaking her head. "You've got a lot of nice things here, but they're not what I'm looking for. I want what your family has every week at home." Late that afternoon, Nate closed up shop early. When he arrived home, he opened the door cautiously and peered in. Lisa was blessing the children, whose faces gleamed in the light of the Shabbat candles. The table was set with the prettiest dishes and a silver cup of wine, but Nate's eye was drawn immediately to the gold-embroidered cloth that covered a platter in the middle. And before he could say hello, before he could even stop himself, he rushed to the table, yanked off the cover, and saw that it was his mother's challah. the challah that he had been dreaming about and yearning for and thinking of nothing except. "This is it," he cried. "It's just right." And the children, surprised to see their father, rushed to give him a hug. And Elisa kissed her husband with a bemused smile on her face. "Yes, Nate, it is just right," she said. "But you're still a little too early for the motzi. Let's put that cover back on." "Elisa, how could this be?" Nate said, smoothing the challah cover back on top of the golden loaves, tumbling weakly into a chair. "I've been trying and trying to make my mother's challah, but I just couldn't do it. And here it is, in my own home." "Don't you remember?" Elisa said. "When we were first married, your mother gave me this recipe, and the children and I make this challah every week." She ruffled his hair, dislodging a few chocolate chips. "You've been so busy with the bakery that you're never home to celebrate with us, but Shabbat has been here all along." And for the first time in years, Nate enjoyed a Friday night with his family. He sang Kiddush, and he really tasted his food. He cuddled with his children and talked quietly with Elisa after dinner. His worries melted away with the candles. And finally, feeling completely relaxed, he fell asleep in his chair. When Elisa roused him to go to bed for the night, he was startled until he remembered he didn't have to do anything or go anywhere. A day of rest was beginning, and everything he needed was right there at home. So my blessing for each of us this Shabbat is that we remember that some of the things that we need the most are not the ones that we have to work the hardest to find. Sometimes the things that we need in our work life, at school, as we're problem solving out in the world, can be found with our family in our home, spending time together. Can you hear at Zone? May this be God's will. With these words on our heart, we think of those who are in need of healing at this time. If you are joining us on Zoom, please feel free to type the name of the person you're thinking of in the chat or to hold them in your heart. And if you are in person with us, please feel free to say their name aloud or in your heart as my hand passes over your section. We'll pause a moment for those who are still typing in the chat. We're also keeping in mind those who have been harmed in the earthquake in Turkey and Syria. We wish them quick recovery and quick return to a home or shelter. We turn to page 371 for the words of Misha Berach. Misha Berach Avotenu bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. We continue on page 586 with the words of Aleinu. Please rise in the ways you are able. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, velo asamanu kemishpachot adama, shelo sam chalkenu kahem, vegoralenu kechol hamonam. Va'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu, bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, ushemo, ushemo, ushemo echad. Please be seated. At this time, we think of those who touched our lives, but who are no longer with us on this earth. This Shabbat, we are remembering those whose yahrzeits occurred this past week. Please rise as your loved one's name is read. Grace Belsky, remembered by Randall Rosenberg. Kay Carmona, remembered by Tony Monroe. David Chapman, father of Susan Schwartz. Leah Pfefferman, mother of Edith Kaplan. Moshe Kapelau, remembered by Sonia Radcliffe. Albert Levy, husband of Lulu Levy and father of Matthew Levy. Herbert Marks, father of Monica Silberberg. Jay Tenen, father of Edith Kaplan. And Lynn Yan, remembered by Holly Diamond Yan and Jason Yan. We now invite all who are observing their first year of mourning to rise at this time. And now we rise as a community with our mourners, and we turn to page 598 for the words of the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitzgadal v'yitzkadash shmei Rabbah, be'alma divrach yirute v'yamlich malchute, be'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach Leolam Ulalmei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, amen. Zichronam livracha, may all of their memories be for a blessing, to which we say, amen. Amen. Please be seated. It is my pleasure to invite up Beth Ehrlich to share some words of announcement on what is going on in our community.
Got to get close, right? Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Torah study is on a 2-week break and will resume on Sunday, February 26th. Join us on February 24th at 7:30 for a special WTBT Shabbat featuring the music of Debbie Friedman. Summer 2023 Jewish camp registration is now open. Check out info on 6 great camps on our website's Northern California Jewish Summer Camps page. The TBT 2023 Camp Scholarship application form is also available on the website or by contacting the office. The deadline to apply is March 3rd. Purim is coming. Come celebrate at TBT on Monday, March 6th at 7 p.m. We'll have fun with a Fiddler on the Roof themed spiel and lots of Hamantaschen to Nashon. Costumes are strongly encouraged. This will be an in-person only event. We'd like to thank Sean Rahman for running AV and to Ann Anderson for representing the worship committee tonight. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. And thanks to Beth for sharing those announcements. And to Susan Amaro for also helping with the worship. Thank you. There's always just so many people to be grateful for. So thank you. Thank you. If I can just put an extra plug in for both the Debbie Friedman Shabbat, we're going to rock out. It's going to be awesome. And also for Purim, I hope to see you there. It will be a blast and a half. It will be a blast and a half. It will be wonderful. We are going to continue on the theme of gratitude, starting with our family blessing. So feel free to reach out to family, however you define it. If you are not in the room with somebody you'd like to send this blessing to, please feel free to close your eyes and to hold them in your heart. And we hope that they receive this blessing. May God bless you and keep you. May God shine God's face upon you and be gracious to you. May God turn God's face to you. May God's face turn to you and grant you peace, to which we say, Amen. Amen. We continue with Kiddush and Motzi. Kiddush can be found on page 123. And for our friends on Zoom, if you want to grab some juice or wine, now is the time to do so. And for our friends in person, as you may have heard me say the past couple weeks, but I'm going to say it once again, we are doing our best to take care of the environment. So for our challah and grape juice, if you have leftover challah, please put it in compost. And I think everything is compostable actually this Shabbat because the paper cups are compostable. So if you, for some reason, brought some extra plastic from outside, that's 1, 2, or 5 that can go in recycling. But everything tonight is compostable, so help us take care of the environment. And the compost is the green bin. Okay, there was your 30 seconds, friends on Zoom. Hopefully everyone has their juice, and we are ready to go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'anu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila lemikra'e kodesh zecher letziat mitzrayim ki vanu v'charta ve'otanu kidashta mikol hamim ve'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. L'chaim. And some motzi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz b'te'avon. We are going to conclude this evening with the words Hevenu Shalom Aleichem, which I believe is on a page towards the back of the book. 10 points if you find it. But we are all about action verbs. So lechu, lecha, let's come, and Hevenu is let's bring. Let's bring with us. Shalom. 6:44. Thank you. 10 points to Ted. Hevenu Shalom Aleichem. Alechem Hevenu Shalom. Hevenu Shalom Alechem. Alechem Hevenu Shalom. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hevenu Shalom Alechem. Alechem Hevenu Shalom. Hevenu Shalom Alechem. Alechem Hevenu. Alechem Hevenu. Alechem Hevenu Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And Shabbat Shalom to our friends on Zoom. Wishing you a wonderful rest of your Shabbat.
Shalom, everybody. Shalom Shabbat.
Good Shabbos.